Welcome back, and thanks so much for staying with Africa News Network with me, Cindy Mabi. The Progressive Professionals Forum has vowed to challenge the new Fica law in the Constitutional Court. The PPF says the act gives undue powers to the country's banking sector by making inspectors accountable to banks. The PPF says it will write to Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba to postpone the implementation of the act, and this is to ensure the protection of its members' rights. PPF is concerned over the fact that the act gives banks the power to make the determination on suspicious transactions and subsequently freeze accounts. President Jacob Zuma signed the contested Financial Intelligence Center Amendment Bill into law on Saturday. The act aims to combat money laundering and the financing of terrorism. And this is how the PPF says that the Fica law gives undue powers to banks. The law abolishes the Counter Money Laundering Council on which the Reserve Bank sits, and it gives banks power to determine suspicious transactions and freeze suspected accounts. It creates prominent influential persons category, which provides grounds to freeze accounts. And prominent influential persons have no recourse against the bank's decision to categorize them and freeze their accounts. The PIP categorization infringes on one's constitutional right of being innocent until proven guilty. And the bill was signed into law by the President after Parliament adopted the amendments.
Only the President can assent to bills in terms of one of his constitutional duties. So let us leave it to the President as our executive leader, that he should apply his mind to this bill now that it is going to come back to him. And all of us hope that he is going to be able to sign the bill, as he has to sign a number of other bills that are often brought before him.
Joining us live in studios, Fiso Mahlangu, resident political analyst, Tony Modise, market analyst, and Progressive Professionals Forum President Mzwanele Manyi will join us in a bit. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. And the whole contestation is around Section 205(3) of the Constitution that takes power from law enforcement in ensuring that, that crime is combated to financial institutions and banks. So in layman's terms, what does it mean if you are a productive South African with an income statement, tax number and a bank account? What does this law mean?
Well, in the first place, the Fica Bill categorizes people as politically exposed persons. And if the bill then leashes out to say you are politically exposed because your ex-husband was a politician, or you were seen on various social pages with people who were politicians or people who are influential in the country, and then there is money in your account entering or exiting your accounts without being formally investigated by the SAPS, your accounts may be frozen. And there's then no way that you can go back and say, why did you freeze my account? Because I did nothing. So they say they're trying to combat the financing of terrorist activities. But what it seems to come across mostly is that it's trying to bankrupt some political parties. It's trying to deal with some political elite or people who might fund political parties. So if you are suspected of being closer to any political cadreship, or you can be a funder or friend of any political movement, in the essence of regime change, your accounts can be closed. This sounds like a good idea, particularly in countries of the West, to say, well, terrorism is an issue. If 2 million just enters someone's account, we must be able to track where it's from. Granted, we've always aspired that money must be tracked, but one shouldn't aspire in this country to give the banks more power than they already have. Otherwise, we want to make the banks like the SAPS and the Hawks to say they can freeze your accounts without proper notice to say, have you done anything wrong? According to the constitution of this country, one is innocent until proven guilty, and then the banks seem to defy that. And I think that is why this Fica Bill has been opposed as much. When one thinks of regime change, opposing the Fica Bill, seems like a ghastly offer. But for those who want to take over government, it seems like a good thing because they can then adapt it when they're in government. But what you want to do is you want to know who's funding this political party, shut them down. You want to ascertain every leader or particularly black leader in this country to corruption. You want to shame them through various social platforms and fake news so that you can take over. And I think this is the narrative that many South Africans have against the Fica Bill. If one presents that it's going to protect South Africans and protect banking institutions against malicious activity, that is granted. But that is just the face. Behind it, it's got very serious political intent. And I think that's why the president spent a lot of time on it, trying to vest the constitutionality of it, but he was not given an opportunity because many said they would take him to court if he does not sign it.
Yeah. So. And Tony, how then do we deal with issues of being unduly pressured by international markets and funders to adopt what they essentially will call a global benchmark of how business should be done, and it prejudices black executives or even those so-called politically exposed persons?
Looking at it, we really need to adhere to, the world regulatory policies, most especially when it comes to, FICA processes, whereby, we need to be able to identify who's doing what. We need to be able to keep up to world standards so that we are able to attract good investment within our country. Remember, we've been focusing more on economic transformation. There can't be transformation if there is no money. So we need these people as well that are from outside to put in money. So basically we need to adhere to their standard to a certain level. It's not really about any political targeting any prominent people. It's about having that element of transparency to what is happening within the financial structures of South Africa.
Yeah, but the PPF will disagree with you rather, that it's not necessarily a benign law that will ensure that all transactions are above board, that there is something sinister.
Just to say before the PPF takes over, I'll give him a few facts to just distort what he's saying.
It is far beyond the bank's hands, as much as it was far beyond the processes as well were far beyond the president's hand, whereby there were protocols to be followed. There were legislation processes to be followed, of which they took time, and then these people on the other side, they thought that no, he's delaying, but these processes take time. It is far beyond political processes. It's about adhering to the processes when it comes to identification of who's who, how much do they have, what type of funds do they have, and they protect the funds as well.
Mr. Mzwanele Manye, of course, the PPF is now considering taking the matter to the Constitutional Court. The likelihood of President Jacob Zuma's decision to sign the bill being overruled or reversed, how probable is that?
Yeah, look, I think our case is very clear. Firstly, I must state that for us as Progressive Professionals Forum, we're totally against any illicit dealings, any money laundering, any financing of terror. We must make that abundantly clear. And we must take offense to all of those that, by virtue of us challenging this legislation, that they think that we're sympathizing with criminality. We object to that very strongly. Here are the issues. Firstly, one of the objectives of this bill is to dissolve a very important advisory council, counter money laundering council. Why would you dissolve that? This council is a council which puts together very important agencies of government. Defense Force is there, NIA is there, police are there, Treasury is there, SARS is there, and Reserve Bank is there. Why do you want to dissolve that? That's the first thing. By dissolving that council, you immediately create vulnerability, you immediately create a serious constitutional crisis, because what then happens is that FIC then all of a sudden assumes a law enforcement role, which in terms of the constitution and laws in this country, it cannot do. Number one, the constitution of this country, section 205, subsection 3, is very clear that the issue of collation of information is a police matter. Then you go further than that. The National Intelligence Act of 1994, Act number 38, is abundantly clear. It lists agencies that are supposed to be doing the collation, the analysis, and all of that of criminal activity. Now FIC is doing this, and I think South Africa must be clear that when we talk about, don't cut me, Cindy, South Africa must be clear. When we talk about money laundering, we're talking about the criminal activity. We're not talking about how you're managing a bank overdraft. It's a crime. When we talk about financing of terrorism, it's a crime. Why is it that we have a piece of legislation that seeks to take criminal monitoring and convicting of people? Because when I close your account, in fact, I'm actually convicting you of, I'm calling you a criminal, because I'm saying you are not fit to be in the financial space, and this happens without due process in terms of the justice system of this country.
So it's just based on a suspicion, and your accounts could be closed with the threshold that, you know, if the system surpasses 1 million transactions per day, therefore you're likely to be a target.
I don't think it's fair that one should call South Africans to vote and elect a government and a particular regime, and to trust one, and to mandate them to represent us, and to trust a government to lead the people, and then have, you know, the defense, the police force, the Department of Intelligence in this country, and then to willy-nilly one day say, well, we're giving the banks the power to close accounts, to audit financial regulations, when we've got the Hawks and intelligence and treasury and the SAPS in this country. I think we must have a clear line between the public sector and the private sector. And if a bank decides, well, they don't like you, can they shut down your accounts? If somebody works at the bank and thinks, well, I've seen him in a new car, I want to investigate their accounts and look at, you know, their investments and publish it to a newspaper and leak it to a newspaper, are they going to do that? I think we must protect South Africans in the sense that this is a government, a constitutional democracy, and people should not afford themselves the right to interrogate people's finances without warrant.
And I think what you're saying, that we all think that we're immune
to
to being impacted by a policy until it is ratified, and then, you know, you sit with a situation where you are a soft target. So just the example you wanted to give to ordinary South Africans like you and me, what does it exactly mean if this Fica Bill will be promulgated?
Look, a couple of things. Firstly, it means that the issue of being declared a criminal is moved from justice system into FIC arrangements, into financial services. That's the first constitutional crisis, number one, because once I close your account and freeze your account because I'm still investigating, what that means, immediately, you must remember that your account is your livelihood. Immediately, it means the next morning I can't go and fill up with my debit card because my debit card can't work anymore. It immediately means that insurance companies can't debit my account. Everybody else that is transacting with my account is no longer having access to me. So in fact, immediately, the client confidentiality is breached, because everybody else that deals with me is all of a sudden going to be aware that I have a problem. And when they ask me, I'm going to say, no, but I do have money in my account, because they're going to think I'm broke. I'll say, but I do have money in my account. So then the question is, if you have money in your account, why is your account closed? Yeah. So immediately the rumor starts, and then before you know, it's in the public domain that don't deal with this one. By the way, as soon as this happens to you, you become a persona non grata to everyone. If maybe it was an issue of having to borrow money to close a particular debt or whatever, all of a sudden you can't even sell your house. The estate agents don't want to deal with you because you're like this. You want to go and talk to a lawyer. Even a lawyer does not want to touch you because you are now this criminal that is not supposed to be operational in the system.
And Tony, I'm sure, yeah, I mean, it sounds very, very ominous in the sense that the banks already are law unto themselves, with many people suffering at the hands of the banks, not only, evictions or illegal evictions. I can list a number of items. But now, over and above that, they'd be able to investigate you without any consultation or consent or even processes for that matter, surely this can be, this can be based on international best practices.
In this way, it will never make business sense when we look at how the banks need to operate. A bank needs to operate in a way that it protects its clients, which are, I mean, we are the livelihood of the bank. If we do not deposit by them, if we don't save money by them, they will shut down.
I don't think Tony's ever been blacklisted.
So the processes,
yeah.
the processes, there need to be a specific process. That is a normal process whereby a client needs to be contacted, that these things are being conducted on your account. Hence, the whole process is about to secure the bank clients themselves and also the state funds. In terms of, I mean, there are those people that are doing tax evasion that we don't even know of. So now, if they just go into, I mean, just shutting down accounts, what is going to happen to those banks? They're going to shut down. People are going to start moving out. The processes will never be like that, because they know that what is involved in terms of if they just execute without, I mean, communicating with.
Yeah, but it's open to abuse.
Where do you live? Where do you live? Don't you know that this thing we're talking about is already happening? People's accounts are being closed as we speak, and the reason, in our view, that the banks are desperate to have this thing passed is because they want to cover their tracks. I don't know where this man lives.
How would they operate without people?
They've got enough. They have enough. So the issue here for us is that the issue of closing accounts in terms of FICA is a criminal monitoring law. It's not your overdraft stuff. It's the issue that monitors criminality. We are saying it cannot be that the criminal enforcement, the law enforcement is outsourced from the security cluster.
I think we get that point. I think what are the targets for the banks, as you're mentioning that this is already in practice, that these are politically influential people or politically exposed people. Generally, if you do business with government or you're a government a public bearer, you are then prejudiced just by virtue of the position you occupy.
We respect international banking standards, and one should always put it out there that no one wants to live in a country where the funding of terrorist activities seems to be existent, you know. But the reality of the matter is, when one lives in South Africa, we shouldn't assume one lives in Hong Kong or France or parts of the US. And so we shouldn't want to sell our brand as it's done everywhere else in the world. Why don't we just do it? Because we are South Africans. And our challenges are unique to our country in 23 years of democracy. Allowing a bill like FICA to come gives the private sector more power than it needs. And then people turn around and say, the government in South Africa cannot perform. Government in South Africa cannot perform because we have withdrawn the power from government and given it to external parties who are in the private sector.
By the way,
for this reason,
it's
why don't we
important.
apply the same policy that we want to apply for FICA? Why don't we empower Treasury to deal with that? Why don't we empower the hawks to deal with that? But we have a thing in this country, we seem to want to withdraw power from government, privatize everything, and then
leave
look
it at
at
the
government,
discretion
and then
of the
look at
banks to
government,
decide
and
what
leave it at
action
the
to take.
discretion of the bank to decide, and then look at government and claim it is inadequate and it is failing.
The banks have not covered themselves in glory in terms of improving confidence of the people towards the banks. The banks, as you see it here and now, are actually still responding to Competitions Commission for their rogue activity, for their corrupt behavior. The closeness, the proximity of the banks and FIC is also too close for comfort. As we see it here and now, last year alone, 60 billion has left the country, and the banks and FIC was there. What were they doing? Big business, white monopoly capital, and the banks and FIC. Something is happening there that is allowed to happen. How can we lose 60 billion when FIC is around? How's that possible?
And I think
through
that
which
the biggest,
medium did it exit? It obviously went through something.
If that's not a suspicious transaction, then it's what qualifies?
This money was not in suitcases.
This is the process that is
it
being
went
put
through
in
some
place to
form of
monitor
banking.
such funds from leaving the country. Because you're starting to have accountable institutions now with FIC so that they can be able to monitor the movement of funds.
Mr. Modise, I think they failed to monitor the 60 billion that left the country. How does one claim now that banks are going to protect South Africans?
And why is it so
when they've
urgent
got
now
to answer to the Competition Commission?
There was wrongdoing. Yes. I think that let's use the example of Oak Bay accounts where, corruption hasn't been proven. There were a number of, 15 suspicious transactions, and money leaves a paper trail. So you're able to know where it emanates from and where it's gone to.
In fact,
but based on the suspicion, the accounts have been closed. So do you understand how this can impact other businesses?
It's around the decision of those specific banks that they decide to close those bank accounts. So then this Fica Bill is going to assist such things that they do not happen. There won't be any suspicion because, there haven't been any complaints further in terms of, the execution of the Fica Bill. Once it's executed, we know that everyone becomes protected. Everyone becomes comfortable to deal with South Africa.
No. We can't trust banks with this. I think here's the issue. We are very supportive of the objectives of the bill, what it seeks to do. No mistake about that. We do want money laundering stopped. We do want all of this corruption stopped. No problem with that. The issue we have is that we cannot have wolves looking after the sheep. This is a problem. We are saying law enforcement must be at the center of this, and at the minimum level, we must restore the Counter Money Laundering Advisory Council, which includes security agencies, as it were. Now, if we have a bill that we have now, this law that has removed the law enforcement agencies and yet we're dealing with criminality, well, actually it's open season. So what this means basically is that once they've closed your accounts, once they've declared you a criminal, basically you've already been sentenced, and your sentence is that you don't have a bank account. But the key issue here is that you could be having a criminal that has been doing money laundering who is now not going to go to jail. All that you're going to get is your account getting closed. Whereas if we had kept the security agencies in the system, when we find such a criminal, the criminal can be locked up.
Yeah.
So why do you want to create a situation where criminals run loose?
Well, the ball is now in Malusi Gigaba's hands, whether he will indeed ratify this particular law, and we'll wait the process of the Constitutional Court with the Progressive Professionals Forum threatening to take this matter as high up as to the highest office, or rather court, in the land. That's where we'll leave it, gentlemen. All the time we have for now. Do stay with us. We're back after this.